Hi, my name is Bill Tolan. I'm your EAP manager. Before we have our main presenter today, we're just going to pay homage to a few of the individuals that made this possible. At the front end, Pat Healy was very helpful with her good instincts, knowing that this was a well worthwhile program. She helped fight for the funding, and for Manny Weiss for coming up with the coins when the chips were down, and for Carol Cruz for doing some work in the background, and Steve Brienza, and Lucy Semino, who's always helpful with a myriad of details, and Pat Conza for reminding me of a million things that I tend to forget. And then over to our technical folks, starting at the top with Gary Solomon, who's always in our corner, and then down to Rudy and Jim Soviero, getting better with that. Maybe might even got it right that time. It only took, 3 years? And Gordon Harper for his efforts to continue to grow with the program. And then one more person who has always been on our mind, regardless of whether she's been here or not, Linda Alessandro, formerly Oberperson. We don't want to use the man word, right? For her continued efforts that go way back to before the year 2000, probably, and some programs we did out in Islip. Now to a speaker, Paul McGee. His credits are so voluminous that we were going to issue another budget text to use as a doorstop, but we couldn't get the postage to bring that in. He's been in many places, in a sense university bred, but certainly has a wide variety of clinical background. He's worked at many federal agencies, Department of Justice, also the Defense Department, I believe. He's also done many programs on TV and radio. He's worked for AT&T, General Motors, Bristol Myers Squibb, and so many, as I said, the doorstop commercials are still...
The cruel and thankless task of somebody's got to do this work.
Somebody's got to do this work. And Paul had reminded me before he got here that, or not before he got here, when he got here, that he knew he was destined for this sort of work when his second grade teacher wrote on one of those little reports they send home to your parents, laughs too much in class. So that was a clue to him, and he continues to laugh throughout his career. And now I'm going to turn you over to the professor, the doctor of laughter, Paul McGee.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. I'm delighted to be here. Now, before I get started, I actually should clear up how I happened to be here to do this program for you, because Bill hasn't told you the whole story. When Bill Tolan decided he wanted to do a program that would draw special attention to the fact that if you want to cope with the stress that automatically goes with all the chaos, all the change that the FAA has been going through in the last year, and still perform at peak levels, you've got to keep your sense of humor. So he decided he would get the funniest person he knew to speak to. Well, of course, Bill knew just who to call. He got on the phone and called this person up who said to him, "I'd love to come, Bill, but I'm sorry, I'm busy that day." So he talked to a couple of the other staff here and said, well, all right, we can't get the funniest person. Let's get the person who is more knowledgeable than anybody else about how humor helps you cope with only the kind of chaos you know about these days. Again, Bill knew just who to call. He got on the phone and called that person up who said, "I'd love to come, but I'm sorry, I'm busy on that day." So finally he called me up. "Paul, can you help us out? Can you come and speak to our staff about dealing with all this transition?" So I thought to myself, now how can I say no to him 3 times in a row? Also, I noticed some of you, as you were filing in and signing in, you spotted me. You said it gave me this strange look like you were thinking, wait a minute, I know that guy. So the answer is no. I was not in the movie. What's the movie? Back to the Future. I am not Christopher Lloyd or Crazy Doc Brown. Or sometimes I get Einstein also. But what I want to do is I want to show you how your sense of humor can take you back to the future, back to the good old days. You know, we're working for the FAA before all this chaos, before 9/11, before all this transitional stuff occurred. I've done a lot of programs, for a lot of different organizations, different types of companies, state government agencies, federal agencies. And the details are different, but basically, wherever I go, to tell you the truth, I see the same pattern, that's been coming up in the last several years. Morale is lower than it used to be. Stress levels are higher than they used to be. And they're not dealing with anything near the chaos that you've been going through lately. And I think that's the reason I was invited to do this. There's plenty of evidence that your sense of humor is a powerful tool in helping you cope with any kind of turmoil, any kind of change and transition that you're dealing with. It doesn't matter what kind of situation you're dealing with. Humor's always got the power. It makes your work more enjoyable. It gives you what I call the emotional resilience you need to be effective on the tough days. Even in cases having nothing to do with your work, but how many of you know about National Cancer Survivors Day? Anybody? Some of you. It's usually the first Sunday in June or at some point early in June. I'm always somewhere in the country doing a program for cancer patients and their families. And when people hear I'm doing a program for cancer patients, I'll often see their jaw drop like, how can you laugh at that? There's nothing funny about cancer. Which is true, of course, but cancer patients tell me quite often, sometimes 5 times I've heard it in these exact words, if it weren't for my sense of humor, I wouldn't have survived the treatments, let alone the disease. That's what allowed me to get through what I had to deal with one day at a time. So what I want to do in the hour and 20 minutes or so, hour and a half we've got together, is convince you you're not dealing with anything like cancer, but sometimes it feels like it, right? With the transition the FAA is going through, I want to convince you it's just as important for you to find some laughter, a light side of everyday situations that are going on as it is for her. It's not easy, though, because I know you're vulnerable. I spoke to Bill about things that have been going on, and he sent me some communications. So I can see that you're vulnerable, especially this year, the last several months, to a condition, you probably never even heard about this. It's called TS. Have you heard about that? It's not tough, although it feels like it, right? The condition I'm talking about is terminal seriousness. You need to know about terminal seriousness because it sneaks up on you. Without you realizing it, gradually you become a much more serious person than you want to be. And the reason you're vulnerable, I couldn't remember all these, so I wrote them down. There's lots of things that are going on. One is, the biggest thing is change. This complete change in your structure and in the way you operate. So you've had to deal with reorganization of the ATO into 3 different regions. You've had budget cuts to deal with, massive budget cuts. You've lost the weather stations, taken over by Lockheed Martin. You had to go through all that. And my understanding was that went totally smoothly, right? Not. There was lots of problems with that transition. There have been a loss of a lot of positions. Everybody in this building is tuned in on that. Some of you had to consider early retirement. Others have been given a choice of, taking a job in a place you really don't want to go. And you know where it is out there in the middle of the country. And some of you had to retrain for a new kind of job. You had to develop new skills, take on new responsibilities, to deal with administrative reassignments, working with a new supervisor. And there's still some confusion about really who's reporting to whom in some of your cases. So there's a lot of uncertainty about just, as far as I can see, there's still a lot of uncertainty about just what's coming down the road for you. So these are things, that rob you, of your sense of humor. It's a setup. It's perfectly understandable if everybody in this room and everybody in the eastern region is suffering from this condition of terminal seriousness. So what I want to do, the focus here is, if you want to be effective from this point on, if you're hanging on, you're still working with the FAA. If you want to be effective in the midst of all the turmoil that you've been going through, you've got to have some skills you didn't need before. You needed them before, but I think you really need them now from this point on, and the skills that give you personal and emotional resilience. So I want to show you how your sense of humor gives you that resilience. So if everybody should have one of these, right? If you didn't get one, raise your hand and Linda will bring one to you. So I'm not going to be able to get all of this, but I don't know, maybe for people watching the video, I don't know if I should say this or not. Are they going to be able to get one of these? If anyone watching the video wants to get one of these. I'm not going to get all these things. So the first, I'm going to focus especially what's on the front page here, really the power of humor to help you be effective and cope with job stress. I'll talk about team identity and so forth, as well as a lot of the things on the second page, how humor helps you be effective on the job. That's our real focus, as well as the next page, specifically how humor helps you cope with stress. Some of these things I won't get to. The next page, things that you can do to put humor to work, even here at the FAA. These are just some examples of what a lot of organizations are doing to bring the spirit of fun. I don't know if, I actually had the impression fun doesn't really live that strongly here. It's incompatible with a lot of what you're all about here. But there's a big movement going on in the country to really change people's mind about how fun helps you be effective, especially when you're in the midst of stress. And I work with an organization now, it's in Delaware, Philadelphia area. It's called the Fun Department. Their whole focus is to bring fun events into the workplace. And what it does is it gives a momentary sort of relief from what's going on at the moment. It elevates people's spirits, creates a positive frame of mind. People don't goof off all the time. It makes them enjoy their work more. So it is something that's actually catching on. Some of you may have heard about the fish philosophy, starting in Seattle, and it's really basically the same idea. So there are some ideas here. What we're not going to have time to do is focus on the how-to side, assuming there are the benefits that I'm going to talk about in terms of helping you work more effectively. Then the question is, well, how do you get yourself to the point where your sense of humor doesn't abandon you when you're having a bad day? Because you notice that's what it does, right? Remember, some of you probably watched the old original Saturday Night Live. Remember Rosanna Dana? What was it she always used to say? It's always something, right? If it's not one thing, it's another. That's the way it's been for you lately, right? You don't know what's around the corner, but you know it's going to be something that you're going to have to deal with. So what I've done is build a skill development program. If you want to get yourself to the point where your sense of humor does not abandon you in the midst of your version of a bad day, there's a book. Actually, Bill Tolan has a couple of copies of this. This is what it looks like. So that's what you're looking for. It's called Health, Healing, and the Immune System. The first part of the book talks about the benefits, but what I'm hoping that you'll do, and I think Bill just contact Bill and he'll let these rotate. If you decide you want to get your own, I've got a few copies with me, which will be at the back of the room. But if you do that with Bill, have a partner. If you really decide you want to go the next step and go beyond what we're talking about here, then have a work partner, someone that's reading this at the same time. Those are the people who make the most progress. So these next 3 pages in the handout really talk about what that program's about. And some things you can do immediately if you decide. It's an 8-step program. It's not a 12-step program. So don't worry. Some things that you can start doing immediately, that's on the next page, how to start lightening up your day now if you don't want to go through a skills training program. Some basic do's and don'ts about joke telling. We're not going to, in storytelling, we're not going to focus on that so much, so you can eyeball those when you get a chance. And the very last page, we're not going to focus on the physical health and wellness benefits, but what's on the last page is a basic summary of what the research shows in terms of how humor contributes to physical health and wellness. And especially there's some consistent, significant benefits in terms of your immune system and pain reduction, a couple of other areas. So enough about that. Now, you don't know much about me. I'm a psychologist who spent 20 years doing research on humor and laughter. I used to have a real job, just like you. And some of that work involved kids. How many of you have your own kids just in the elementary school years? Or grandkids? Some of you have hair like this. Nobody really has hair like that. So that was like 4 or 5 hands. So most of you probably aren't aware of how early they're teaching kids about AIDS. These days, it's in the early elementary years. One day, a 2nd grader came home from school. His mother asked him what he learned in school that day, and he said, well, I'm not sure, but I think we're supposed to buy condominiums and stay out of intersections. The thing that's great about kids is that kids are in close touch with what I think is the basic foundation for your sense of humor. And it's that basic sense of fun, that basic playful attitude that we all had when we were kids. I mean, I'm not the only one, right? I got the evidence on my report card. So what we're going to do is going to spend a couple of minutes doing something. It's basically a kid's game. Now, I know some of you haven't done this in weeks, especially here in the building. So the game's called Simon Says. Do you remember Simon Says? The rules for Simon Says are simple. Basically, you do whatever I ask you to do as long as I say Simon Says first. If I don't say Simon Says, don't do it. So obviously, you'll have no trouble with this, right? So Simon Says the game is starting now. So now you're going to be sitting for an hour and a half here. So let's all stand up to do this.
Simon didn't say it.
See, you saved them all, right? All right, so as she reminded you, it's going to be tricky here. So you got to pay close attention. So Simon Says, let's all stand up to do this. Now, we'll start off with something really simple. Simon says for everyone to raise your hands in the air. No problem. Everybody's got that. Now, Simon says to clap your hands twice. Great. Now, again. That was as close as you could get, right? All right, Simon says you can put your hands down. Now, we need some physical exercise since we're going to be sitting here the whole hour. So right in place at your chair, I want everyone to just jump up in the air a little bit. Wow. Of course, it would be Linda. She doesn't miss a chance, right, for physical activity. All right, Simon says for everyone to jump in the air right in place at your chair. I didn't say to come down. I discovered a terrific silly thing to do 4 or 5 years ago. I won't tell you how I discovered this, but I call it loose lips. And it looks like this. Now, if you've been pretty depressed with what's been going on at the FAA in the last few months, and so you can let your voice reflect that as we do this, which would sound something more like this. Or if you're in an optimistic, upbeat, positive mood, especially since we're talking about the importance of keeping your sense of humor, you can let your voice reflect that, which would sound something more like this. Or you can do it without your vocal cords, totally different effect, which would be... Although some of you have the look going, no way I'm going to do that, right? All right, is everybody ready? Okay, I want everyone in the room to do loose lips together. I was pretty sure you'd go for that, right? But you were the only one in the room. I didn't say Simon Says, right? All right, Simon says for everyone in the room to do loose lips together. That's good, actually. She has the bowing style. Yeah. Of course, that's not the only thing that's shaking in there, right? I used to think that was a terrific, silly thing to do until, recently there was a young woman in one of my programs, and she said, the only reason you can do that and I can't is you got loose skin. Which took some of the fun out of it. Now this one, that's good. You're still working on it. That's it. See, now this building will transform if everyone in the room is able to do that. Now this is tricky. You've got to pay close attention. Simon says to take your index finger and thumb and put them in a circle, like this. Now Simon says to take your index finger and thumb and press it tight against your chin. Yeah. This is not a chin, right? The same Savior back there. I saw several of you sort of quickly going, I got it. Okay, Simon says you can take your hand down. Now, last dance, what I want you to do is pick a partner, preferably a twosome, or if it's a threesome, that's okay. Without touching that person, without saying anything to them, I want you to make them laugh, or at least smile, before they make you laugh or smile. Just be spontaneous and silly and do whatever comes up. Simon says go ahead and do that now. from a distance. Okay, Simon says the game is over. Now give yourselves a hand for being silly. And you can have a seat. She's afraid I'm going to fall over the edge, right? Is that a distraction? Oh, the pin fell. Now the question is, why would I want to take a couple of minutes and do something like that? I'm certainly not... Well, that was effective, wasn't it? I'm certainly not suggesting that, when you go back to your office, in the middle of a conversation, say with your boss, in the middle. Although, interestingly enough, if you're comfortable enough in your job here at the FAA to do something like that, you will discover that the stress that goes with working in this building will go down very quickly, right? Because you don't have a job anymore, right? But that's admittedly, that's low level, that's immature, that's childish kind of stuff. So the reason I wanted to do something like that is I wanted to put you in touch with what I think is an obstacle to working on your sense of humor. And it's a fear of foolishness or discomfort, feeling embarrassed, just letting yourself go and doing something that's physically playful or even silly. That's not where you want to wind up with. What you really want to wind up with is what's going on between your ears, right? Humor is mental play. It's intellectual play. It's play with ideas. But I've been involved with this in one way or the other for a long time. 20 years as an academic person, and then the last 13 or so just as a speaker doing this. And from both vantage points, it's clear to me that adults who've lost their sense of humor, and there's lots of reasons you can lose it, right? Some people lose it because of health issues, health problems, relationship problems, financial problems are going on. But our focus here is stress related to what's going on in this building and in the FAA in general. You've been through undergoing a massive amount of change. It's a setup for you losing something that you may have had before. And I have people tell me quite often, I say, yeah, I used to be the guy who sort of, had a quick, witty remark to make, in situations, or I had it was easy to laugh, and they can't remember when that changed, but, say, I don't do that anymore. And so it's totally understandable why you don't do that. And so the spirit of play is really a way of short-circuiting. If any of you, borrow that book from Bill's office and look at the skill development program, you see that play is right up there at the beginning. Before we ever talk about developing humor skills, about playing with language, finding humor in everyday situations, or poking fun at yourself, there's a focus on just getting back in touch with the playful side of yourself. It's much more important than most of you would guess, because your own natural sense of humor comes back when you get to the point that you're comfortable at doing things that are physically playful. There's a change in your frame of mind, your spirit, your emotional place. And that's where humor lives. And that's why as people get stressed out, you all have your own style, right? Some of you in recent months have just gotten a lot more tense, a lot more anxious, because let's face it, we don't know, right? You don't know what's around. You don't even know if you're going to be here. There are people who aren't here anymore who used to be in the building. So you don't know what's around the corner. It's absolutely understandable. So if, in fact, you want to get back to that point, then you've got to have some skills that give you the resilience. So physical play, that's why I won't say any more about that. But maybe I will. One more vantage point. I don't know if you ever watch National Geographic type programs, but over the last 20 years, there have been, I think, 4 that I'm aware of that have just focused on animal play. There's all these animal behavior programs. 4 focus just on play behavior. And when I used to be an academic person, I was on top of the research on this in general. In short, it's easy to make the case that when animals in the wild are playing, they're developing skills that are crucial for their survival. If you've ever had your pet, dog or cat, you'll see remnants of this. You'll see them when they're young. It's always there when you're young. It tends to disappear more as you get older. But within the young, you'll see them chase each other when they'll turn around. They'll chase and turn around and be chased. They'll do play attacking, play defending. In the wild, animals are developing skills, again, that are crucial for their survival. Remember one I saw, it was some kind of, it was a very small deer. It might have been called a pronghorn deer. But it lived in Africa in high grass. It had this strange behavior. It would just be running around and it would go, boop, a vertical leap. So it would be going, doo, 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 doo. It looked very bizarre. But it turns out that this deer lives in high grass on the plains. So now it makes sense, right? So what it's doing, it's going up, it's scanning for predators, and then it goes down and hides in the safety of the grass. So there's all kinds of examples like that. And so how does humor tie into that? If you're in the jungle...
Are you related to that deer?
I could be, yeah. If you're in whether it's an asphalt jungle or a real jungle out there, if you're in the jungle and there's a lion coming at you, the lion doesn't care how good a sense of humor you've got, right? You're going to die. It doesn't make any difference. But most of the time, hopefully, I mean, your life is not on the line. The kind of stresses we're talking about, in the building, are work-related stress. It's deadlines. There's most of you, I assume. I haven't talked to you about your individual positions, but it's a sure bet that most of you have got more on your plate than you did a year or two ago, right? And so those are the conditions on which, in my view, in short, your sense of humor is just as important for your psychological survival, for the coping side, as physical play is for the literal survival in the wild. So that's the big picture on play and humor as one form of play. There's all kinds of research, massive amounts of research, good experimental research, and coping research. That humor is a powerful tool in helping you cope. After just a couple of examples, if you have friends who are firemen, police, EMS people, nurses in critical care, they have a certain kind of sense of humor, right? Even after crashes. Remember after, remember a value jet crash, in Florida, in one of the swamps, whichever swamp it was. A joke that was circulating afterwards was, what did one alligator say to the other alligator? Those value jet meals aren't half bad. So that's crude and inappropriate. See, especially, if you're working for the FAA, I mean, the general rule is the more closely you are connected to the disaster, the tragedy, the less funny that is, right? But it's no coincidence. After the Challenger, the initial explosion, the Challenger disaster, apologies for people who put off at this, but an example of what was going on at the time. Remember there was a teacher, Krista McAuliffe, I think her name was, who was in that, and a joke that was going around at the time was, did you know that Krista McAuliffe had blue eyes? One blue this way, one blue that way. So it's hard to laugh at that, but why is it there? It's always there, and there are other examples, crude, sick humor, but the reason, and there's plenty of research on this, the reason that humor is always there is that the people who are most closely involved have to deal with that. If you're a fireman, if you're picking up pieces of bodies after a plane crash, you've got to have some tools for getting past it, for getting behind you. If you're an air traffic controller, you have something that's going on. You don't want those people having, we missed something. There's something, we should have done something. They got to have their full attention. My understanding is that people who cannot, and I'll talk about this later, but get the emotional stuff behind. They're not on those jobs, right? They're not on them very long. Can't afford to have them there. But the same principle applies to everybody in the room. You got to have tools for letting go. So I'm going to show you how humor does that. So let me ask you something personal. I've spoken to Bill on the phone, but nobody else in the room. How many of you have a good sense of humor? Just raise your hand if you do. What are you looking at him for? Actually, 2 or 3 of you sort of. Some of you raised your hands immediately, no hesitation, and a couple of you sort of got part way. 2 of you didn't raise your hand until you saw someone next to you. And if he's raising his hand, I got him beat. What about telling jokes? How many of you are really good at telling jokes? 2 hands, 3 hands. Isn't that what it means to have a good sense of humor, is to be a good joke teller? See, I agree. Most of you were saying or nodding no. And besides, what's the problem with telling jokes?
Can't remember it.
Right? That's one problem. Yeah. There's the politically correct. I mean, you're very politically correct here, I understand. But that remembering, right? This is a big problem for jokes. So if you don't remember any other joke or story, you have to remember this. This is just for people who have trouble with the punchline. There's this older preacher and a younger preacher, and they're having a conversation. And the older guy's explaining to the young guy what he can expect in his new career as a preacher. And he says, some Sunday mornings, you look out in your congregation just like this, and you'll notice partway through people are, he says, you start losing them. And I've learned the perfect thing to do when that happens. Get behind the pulpit and say, last night I held in my arms a woman who was not my wife. And he says, and it perks them right up, and they just stare at me. And then I say, it was my dear, sweet mother. So the young guy says, well, good. If I ever have a problem, maybe I can use that. I'm sure it won't happen to me. But sure enough, the first sermon he's given on his own in this church, he notices he's losing them partway through. So he remembered what the older preacher told him. And he said, and he was behind the pulpit, and he says, last night I held in my arms a woman who was not my wife. Then he hesitated and said, I can't remember who she was. See, in that case, forgetting the punchline is what makes the joke work. If you forget the punchline, it doesn't work that way, right? But that's not the key. I think to getting the benefits that I want to emphasize, I think there are a couple of things. First of all, getting yourself to the point where you can find a light side of things that are happening spontaneously in the building or with the changes, in the transition. Even though it's stressing you out, if you can find the light side in the midst of it, that's especially when you get the benefits the most, although that's the toughest thing to do, right? Then the second thing is belly laughter. Some of the benefits come from the physical activity of having a let-go belly laugh. Now, obviously, it's not always appropriate in this building to have a let-go belly laugh. But when it is, at lunch or you're walking down the hall, that's, again, some of the benefits we'll talk about really come from that. So let me ask you this, and be honest now. How many of you can remember having a good let-go belly laugh at some point in the last 24 hours, either yesterday afternoon or this morning? Now, we're not surprised in your case, right? So that was like 4 or 5, maybe 6 hands at most. So most of you, 3/4 of the room, either you've forgotten how to do this, you're too stressed out with all the chaos that you've been living through in the last few months, or you don't have time because you've got more on your plate. Everybody's going in too many directions. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a laughter exercise. We're going to relearn how to do belly laughter. And I've got plenty of room up front here, so what I'd like you to do is maybe 4 or 5 of us come up front and do this. Now, we're all going to do the same thing together. Now, we're not that big a group here, but still, it works a little bit better if we have 4 or 5 people up front with this. What we're going to do, I'm not going to pick on people who come up here, but we're going to break laughter down into 5 basic steps. We'll start off with something really simple, and then we'll add more to it until we have full-blown belly laughter.
What the heck?
Yeah, see? Terrific. And what is your name?
Bob.
Bob. Okay, yeah, go ahead. You're halfway up already.
I'm just afraid it's not going to be funny enough.
Oh, no. Well, that's my problem. That's my problem. Now, we need another woman up here, too, right? Well, there's 3. There's also 3 back there. 5 back there. Are you thinking about coming up? I think about it.
Come on, Kat.
I know how to settle this. You can both come up.
Come on.
Okay, so if you feel the urge once we get started, and you can see this is not a threat, then you can just join us. All right, so now we're not up here to entertain you. This is a team thing, right? We're all doing this together. So step number 1 is really simple, and it's basically just a smile, so we'll all do it together, and it looks like this. Oh, see, he's done this before. Now check the person on either side of you to be sure they got it right. You two keep an eye on each other in the back, right? Okay? Don't worry, it gets tougher as we go along. And by the way, for the cameramen, you guys, I think you can do this at the same time, except for the last step. Step number 2 is to raise your eyebrows and squint a little bit. Add that to step number 1. Yeah, see, he's got it. And what we get looks like this. See, now we're making a little bit of progress here already. Now, step number... He's getting sore muscles already. See, that's what happens if you don't do this for a long time. Step number 3. Now, I have to tell you, step number 3 is not that interesting all by itself. I call it the lower jaw drop. Maybe you recognize it. It's one of your colleagues at the end of the day, or somebody you live with. Not very interesting. And all by itself, it looks like this. Not very, although actually it's interesting when he does it. Now check it out. But when you put all 3 of those together, it becomes much more interesting. So we're going to put all 3 of those together, and what we get looks like this. He's got the head nod too, right? Now, step 4. Now, step 4. Wait, when you're having a real belly laugh again, there's some muscle changes that go on, right? For example, these stomach muscles, they just tighten up like a drum when you're having a real belly laugh. In fact, an interesting thing, do you all know each other pretty well in the room?
Oh, yeah. Very well, yo, very. Oh, Kathy, no,
Not that well.
Not that well.
An interesting thing to do, I ask permission to do this, but, and maybe try this at home, but I'll just simulate it here. If you put your hand on someone else's stomach, what you'll feel is this kind of thing going on. You'll feel those muscles tighten and relax, tighten and relax. You can't feel it on your own stomach, but in someone else you'll notice it.
I can feel it.
You can feel it. And
how about you, Bill?
And there's actually another set of muscles. In fact, 2 sets of muscles, just a little lower. I won't name these muscles, but just so you know where we're going with this, have you ever heard the phrase, laugh till you leak? So, women especially, I understand, once you've had a... Women especially, once you've had a couple of babies, I've heard several women say that things change, right? And one woman told me she laughed so hard that tears were rolling down her legs. So what we're going to do is we're going to tighten up all those muscles, add that to the first 3 steps, and what we get looks like this.
Wait, do it again.
And so we're going to tighten up all those muscles, and what we get looks like this. And you don't have to worry, you're sitting down. I'm sorry, what was it you're going to ask?
What makes your side hurt when you laugh?
What makes your side hurt when you laugh is a question, and I think the reason is I've had people tell me, see, the next step, what we're just going to lead to is we're going to do we're going to do 20 or 30 seconds of nonstop belly laughter, and what people
no leaking
allowed. I don't know. We didn't make preparations for this, so no leaking. But I think what's going on is you're using muscles that you're not used to using. In fact, pay attention. Sometimes people tell me, like these muscles are sore. In fact, Bill already said that just from what we've done so far. Or your stomach muscles are. So you're using them, especially if you have a let go belly laugh that goes on and on. So that's why you're sore afterwards. So what we're going to do 20 or 30 seconds of nonstop belly laughter as a lead-in to other points I want to make. And
the pens are in the back of the room.
Well, you are prepared. So, yeah, that's right. You can also just clean the rug afterwards. So what we're going to, this is a team thing, and we're all doing it together. If in your view, the person on either side of you, maybe except for the standing cameraman, is not participating fully, do whatever's necessary to bring them along. Because we're not that big a group here. Anyone I see not throwing yourself into this, I'm going to ask you to come up and do a solo laugh.
Oh, boy.
So we're just going to throw ourselves into it and start laughing. I give them a hand for being brave and coming up here. Thank you. And you can have a seat. Thanks a lot. Now, for those of you who are able to throw yourselves into that, what I'd like you to do is pay attention to any physical changes you notice going on in your body and just shout out, what do you notice that's different relative to before we did the laughter thing?
My eyes are tearing like crazy.
His eyes are tearing. Right? I saw several of you with your fingers in your eyes. And what else? Breathing, a change in breathing, right? And what's your heart rate doing? So it's a pretty demanding cardiac exercise.
When you fell down, you scared me. I thought something was wrong.
When you thought that was funny?
Yeah. And what else? Do you notice it's different? Change in the way you feel or a physical change? Yeah, actually, no, someone said, well, who said that? Tired? Oh, that was you? So we'll come up on that. And what else do you notice?
Well, I mentioned skin color change.
Skin color change, yeah. Actually, so a lot of you know, like a flushing, a pinking of the cheeks, and what's happening there is, actually, when you think about what you're doing when you laugh, it's sort of it's a bizarre thing to do. If you were God in designing humans, would you have seen fit to say, I'm going to have them notice things that are sort of bizarre, incongruous, funny, and then how can they show that? You know, oh, and I'll have them push out a lot of air until they can't push out anymore again. And then you take a deep breath and start over. It's a bizarre thing to do. And so I forgot where I was going with that. What was it you said, the person?
Because you fell down, you hit your head, you forgot.
I forgot already. Okay, anything else? Now, nobody's mentioned the thing that's often mentioned first or second, the R word. Feeling more relaxed. See if you look at your body language now, and she's sort of sitting. I mean, before we did the laughter thing, most of you were sitting sort of regular in your chair like this. And now, I look at Bob, and a couple other of you sort of look more like this, right? You look looser, and if you pay attention to what's going on in your body, you can feel that relaxation effect. No, it comes pretty quickly. It comes very quickly.
Stop waiting,
Actually, well, there's a couple of separate mechanisms. Some of it does come later, actually, because some muscles relax, automatically, when you're laughing, like skeletal muscles in your arms and legs relax while you're laughing, and that's why little kids, if you've had your own kids, you've seen this. Let's say you've got, a 4-year-old, and you've got a dozen 4-year-olds over for a birthday party. Something happens to get those kids started laughing. What do you see them do before long? Yeah, they fall down. Sometimes they'll be rolling on the floor laughing. Why do little kids fall down when they're laughing hard?
Very relaxed.
Yeah, and I think those muscles relax. And little kids don't fight what's going on in their muscles. They relax, they go down. Most of you have learned not to do that.
My grandmother doesn't laugh, but she falls down all the time. What's wrong?
She needs a verbal cane, right? And so the reason that's important, the relaxation. By the way, if you have any doubts about this, when you go up to your office or you get home, while you're laughing hard, try lifting something really heavy. It's heavy for you, say a couch or a table or something, with someone else on the other side. Try lifting it across the room, or really put it to the test, lifting it up, taking it up the stairs while you're laughing. What will you notice?
Impossible.
Impossible. You can't do it because, your your body's sending those muscles a signal to relax. And you're trying to fight the body's natural tendency, to relax.
What happens when you try to start giggling, you just can't stop?
All the contagious effect. I mean, there's, we've known about the contagious qualities of laughter for a long time, and so it feeds on itself. I mean, there's some new stuff. They're called mirror neurons, in the brain. Humans have them. Other species have been found to have them, and it's like a direct impact for what an animal's doing to get you doing the same thing. And like even with very young babies, you sort of, you've seen them probably on some videos, sticking out the tongue, and they will start doing the same kind of thing. There are other ways in which it shows up. So the why of it, in terms of why it happens, is not clear. There's no doubt about the fact that it is one of those contagious qualities. I mean, one of the things early in an evolutionary sense, it seemed to have a very important function. Like it sent a signal to, I think initially, at the very beginning, like it occurred in the context of play. There are other species. We're not the only ones who laugh. Like gorillas laugh. Actually, chimpanzees laugh more than gorillas. Gorillas are pretty silent. Chimpanzee. Have you ever heard a chimpanzee laugh? It's something. Well, no, it's more like a. They sort of go in and out.
That's where I saw it now.
Yeah. Well, it could have been. I mean, I hadn't planned on talking about this, but I had a gorilla once tell me I wasn't very bright.
He told you?
Yeah. Have you know Coco? Have you seen Coco the gorilla on National Geographic? She was the first gorilla. Washoe the chimpanzee was taught sign language, way back in the late 70s. Coco the gorilla, also, in the late 70s. So I visited Coco and her human handler, who at the time was a graduate student at Stanford, and their understanding of vocal English is quite good. They don't. I mean, I saw Penny the human tell Coco while I was there to go to the refrigerator and get a can of Coke, bring it to her. Well, they can do that, no problem. But their vocal apparatus doesn't allow them to speak. So there was this major breakthrough when they started using sign language. Bottom line is they function about the same level as a 3 to 4-year-old child. Changes your perspective on putting them in a zoo, in a cage. But Coco, we were nose to nose. Coco was in her cage there, and Penny the human asked, which one of us, this is the 70s, and I had an afro and a beard. I looked a little like a gorilla, right? And Coco signed something to me, and the Penny, the human said, which one of us do you want to come into your cage? And I just looked at Coco, and so Coco said, he should come in. He's stupid. Because I didn't respond to her. It's very humbling to have a gorilla tell you you're not very bright, It puts things in perspective. In any case, that was, a big aside. In terms of the benefits, we sort of got an aside here from the benefits. In terms of, finish off on the relaxation effect. Remember those muscles that got sore? Some muscles are actually contracting. They're working when you laugh. And when you stop laughing, gradually they tend to relax. That's the slower effect you were talking about. It's a general principle of exercise physiology. You work muscles and you stop working them, they tend to relax. So through both mechanisms, laughter, when it's appropriate, and I haven't said this yet, you can be competent, professional, good at what you do in this building. You always got to make a judgment about when any kind of laughter, humor, or play is appropriate. But when it is, a good let-go belly laugh like we just did gives you what all stress management techniques are designed to do. Whether it's biofeedback training, massage, deep breathing, meditation, they're really all designed to produce muscle relaxation and the easing of psychological tensions that goes along with it. So that's, in terms of the basic coping side, that's why it's important. There's this woman who suddenly was under a lot of stress. She had a bunch of friends over for a holiday and neighbors. She was baking 3 or 4 cakes, and she was tasting the batter, and she swallowed the spoon. She called her doctor up and said, Doctor, I just swallowed a spoon. What should I do? And the doctor said, sit down and don't stir. Now, what kind of joke was that? Sick. Well, it's bad and it's sort of a groaner, right? It is a groaner. And it's no coincidence, and it's a pun, right? It's a basic, simple pun. It's no coincidence, that we groan, at puns. If you've had, I know there's chronic punsters in the room, right? We all know someone in the building is a chronic punster. But if you've had your kids, you remember around first grade they get the riddle disease, they'll drive you crazy, right? For about, 3 years, and then they move on to something else. So the reason we groan at puns is that puns are really basically elementary school level humor. But have you also noticed that it's funnier when you make them up? People, I see this a lot. Come on, that was good. That was funny. It's funnier to the person who makes them up because puns are not memorized. It's not like jokes. Puns are not memorized humor. They're spontaneous. People think of them on the spot. And that's why it's funnier to the person who makes them up. For you, it's just giving you a kid's level humor. But the reason I'm drawing attention to that, just a brief aside here in terms of the how-to side. I said I wouldn't focus on how to develop the skills, but here's just a brief aside. In terms of your verbal sense of humor, it's where I have people start off with puns, even though it's low-level humor. Because I'll promise you, again, it's funnier when you make them up. And when you're having a bad day, whatever your version of a bad day is in the building, you're the person who comes up with a spontaneous, witty, simple pun even. It's funnier under those conditions because you've got a greater need to laugh. It helps let go of the tension. We'll talk about that in a minute. So, yeah.
What actually sets off the joke is that, we're like logical beings, human beings, and something that goes against our logical nature in our subconscious just like, it snaps it. That's really what.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Again, for the camera, we're logical beings. So anything that goes again, it's that he said, it just sort of sets us off, and it's built in. Again, if you've had your own kids, even if you're the most serious person in the world, that's going to have some impact. But we have a biological drive built into us to play. And once you develop symbolic capacities as a person, you will play with them because that drive is so strong. That's why humor is there. It's built into us. It's our heritage. So it's built into us to give pleasure from turning reality on its ear. And the other thing, one other exciting thing, this is pretty new research. You know what an MRI is? Like a functional MRI, it basically tells you what areas of the brain are active during a given activity. So we know there's certain areas that light up in response to music, language, and so forth. With humor, there's some very old areas of the brain. For those who care, it's called the mesolimbic dopaminergic reward system. So the word dopamine might be familiar to you in terms of pleasure. And the same areas of the brain that light up in response to cocaine and methamphetamine light up in response to humor. So, I mean, that's an exciting finding. So that's one of the, we've known for a long time through our own experience, it feels good, right? It feels good to have a let-go belly laugh. So one of the reasons we get that joyful, positive, pleasure, feel-good after effect is that a certain area of the brain is activated by humor and laughter that mediates that experience. So for people that get hooked on drugs, if you can get them hooked on the same kind of thing through humor, it's a much healthier path to go. In terms of energy level, let's move on to another thing. Now, I think the person in white said she felt more tired. So let's afterwards. So everybody votes on this. There's three possibilities. If you can remember back, this would have been easier to do right after. And even for people on the camera, if you actually did this exercise with us, probably didn't, but just decide for yourself, did you feel more energy, less energy, or no change? You might have felt less energy because, remember, your heart rate was up. You might have felt more tired, had less energy, or no significant change, or more energy. How many of you felt less energy? You were more tired, had less energy after? You're not going to raise your... Oh, you're too tired to raise your hand, so we know that's true. she couldn't get her hand up. How many of you noticed... so it was one hand. No significant change. How many of you noticed no significant change one way or the other? So that's nobody... Oh, one. Were you here when we did that? Yeah, you were. You just walked in. Yeah. How many of you noticed you had more energy after So that's everybody but 2 hands in the room, although one of you didn't vote. So when I do it systematically, it's usually about 75% of the people say they feel more energized. Even though your heart rate's up, you're perspiring, seems like you should be more tired. Most people feel more energy, and on the average, that's about 10% to 15% say they notice no significant change one way or the other, and usually 5 to 10% who say they feel less energy, more tired. So this is sort of consistent with the general rule. The reason that's important, what happens to your energy level on your version of a tough day? If you got more on your plate, it's one of those days, right, if there were 3 of you, it'd be hard to get everything done you've got to get done. What happens to your energy level on those days? Yeah, it goes down, right? And so anything, again, when the situation is appropriate, like sharing a laugh with a colleague that elevates your energy level at the end of the day or whenever you're having a tough situation, that's worth a lot. So that's clearly one of the benefits. The most important thing in terms of the coping side concerns what happens when you're frustrated, upset, angry. You've had some reason to be upset with what's going on around here, right? Have you ever had the experience of being frustrated, upset? In the middle of your upset, something happens to get you started laughing? How many of you have had that experience? So it's maybe a third of the room or more. If you've had that experience, what happens to the anger and the upset?
Dwindles.
That's a perfect word, dwindles, right? I never thought of it as dwindle, but there's less of it. If you're lucky, it goes away completely, but that's probably not that's the perfect word. If you pay attention to what's going on in your body, you'll notice that you're not as upset as you used to be. It's not easy to laugh, though, right? Because you're perfectly justified in being upset with what's going on here. Sometimes people get brought in, just to make changes, right? And then those people are gone. So that's, I was going to say kids. Again, if you've had your own kids, let's say you've got a first grader. They've done something wrong. They know they're in big trouble. You're upset at them. They learn that if they can get you laughing, it goes better for them. Because what they do is they change your mood. They pull you out of your upset. George Carlin, remember when Carlin was doing stand-up before, 15 or so years ago? Remember the routine he had about his stuff? He's got a house full of stuff, and when he travels, he takes all his stuff with him. I suggest anyone working for the FAA in the last year, you got a lot of stuff that you brought that stuff probably with you right into this room. You bring it in every day. You take that stuff home with you at the end of the day. But I'm not talking about physical stuff. What kind of stuff am I talking about? Yeah, mental stuff, emotional stuff, baggage. We have different terms for it. So I want to say that this chair here represents all of that stuff. We have different kinds of stuff. Let's say the first part of the chair stands for, maybe stuff having nothing to do with your work here. Let's say you had an argument with your husband or your wife or somebody you're very close to. Last night you had the argument. When the argument's done, is it really done? Said that awfully quickly. Never. Right? So you have an argument the night before, and you walk into your office the next day and say, I can't believe I married this idiot. He's always going to do that. He's never going to change. So you walk in ready to perform at peak levels and provide quality service. And you got some stuff from the night before, which makes it pretty difficult to do. And then the second part of the chair, I hate to say this. Pardon?
Postal worker syndrome, yeah.
Postal worker, that's right. Well, that's interestingly enough, I've actually, after some of those incidents, once in Michigan, Royal Oak, Michigan, I was just not far away. And another time where I lived in Montclair, New Jersey, I was nearby when there was a shooting. So I approached the post office, they have no interest, in dealing with that kind of issue. Say the second part of the chair, sometimes we have stuff about our colleagues. Have you ever noticed that some of the people you work with never learn how to do things right? Which is the way you do them, right? So we've got some stuff we're carrying around for them. Let's say this last part of the chair, well, it's all those things that set you up for terminal cirrus that I talked about, especially for you. It's the change, the chaos, the uncertainty. You don't know what's going to be happening to the FAA, just even in the near future. So, and then there's everyday things. So let's say you've got a meeting that it's somewhere else further out the island. I don't know where it would be. Maybe it's over at LaGuardia. And you've got it's a 9 o'clock meeting, and you're making a presentation. You're representing the FAA at this meeting. You've got to be there on time. You're the one it's like me. I can't be late coming in here. If you walk in a little bit late, no problem. And let's say if you live, somewhere nearby the JFK here, let's say how long would it normally take under ideal conditions? Well, let's say not ideal, but in the morning. How long?
30, 40 minutes.
30, 40 minutes, even in the morning? So,
Well, if it's off hour, yeah, 30, 40 minutes.
okay, so let's say you leave yourself twice as long as you think it should take. So you leave yourself an hour and a half, to get there, for this 9 o'clock meeting. So you leave plenty early, and you've got, say 20 traffic lights before you get on, the freeway. So what happens on this particular morning where you have to be on time?
Traffic jam.
Just traffic, right? It's no big surprise, or what else? An accident, right? So it slows you down. And
You catch every red light.
you can't ever remember, you take this drive every day. You never hit every single light before, right? Chooses this morning where you got to be on time. And those tracks you crossed for years, you never saw a train cross them. Chooses that particular morning. But your car is no dummy. Your car eventually gets through all the traffic lights. It gets by the accident on the freeway. It gets by the construction. There was no construction there yesterday. And your car arrives where you're going for the meeting. Your body does the same thing. Now, what does your mind do? It takes all those things with you, right? It takes every one of the traffic lights, the construction, the accident, and the traffic. So when you arrive for this critical meeting for the survival of the FAA, maybe the survival of this building, this is what you look like. You got your stuff hanging out. Of course, this is not a problem, right? But with the FAA, 16 years. Certainly dealt with tougher situations than this. And besides, who's going to know? And actually, as this restructuring that's been going on, this is probably one of your better days, right? In recent months, a little more typical for you is probably something like this. I just love working for the FAA. Yeah, we are committed to quality service and support. And in case you hadn't noticed it, you've had a lot of 3-chair days this year, right? And this is the point where your sense of humor abandons you. Everybody knows when you're having a 3-chair day, there's nothing to laugh at, right? And you've had your share of them, and they may be coming in the future. So this is, actually, I got to get rid of one. Hey, Bob, could you take this top one?
Come on, Bob.
Yep. Thanks. Well, actually, I didn't try that out in advance. They're heavier than I thought. From your own experience that the stuff accumulates, right? For you, what this is, it's for some of you, it's anger, frustration. For others, it's tension, anxiety, the uncertainty where you're going. Some of you, it's depression. When is it going to end? And so you've got to have some skills at letting go. This is, excuse me, it's the toughest thing to do when you're having this kind of day, and it goes with the chaos and the change and the transition that you're going through. Perfectly understandable. You've got these 3- and 4-chair days. But you've got to, if you want to continue to work in the FAA and be effective at what you do, again, you've got to have skills at getting rid of the stuff. Again, that's to take the extreme example, consider the air traffic controllers. Whether it's something at home, it's something that's going on within the FAA, you don't want them, and the organization obviously doesn't allow people that can't let go of their stuff. You've got to be totally focused. You've got to be attentive. You've got to be obviously at peak levels. There's less on the line in that sense for the rest of you, but in its way, it's just as important. I'm not going to get that stuff back up here again, but there's no way you can be effective. Remember, I couldn't even see some of you? When, like, visually, you're blocked out in the room. Well, emotionally, that's what emotions do. You can't connect with each other. It's hard to function at peak levels. It goes with everybody. So you've got to have skills for letting go. And there's plenty of good basic research documenting humor is a powerful tool just for letting go. So that's the most important thing I have to say in terms of how humor helps you be effective on the job. Now, you notice you're starting to get used to me like this? If I were to wear this long enough, pretty soon, and you'd get used to me, right? Now that you think about it, isn't there someone you work with? They may not be in the room here, but can't you think of somebody, not you think, but they're always carrying 3 or 4 chairs around?
Immediately.
Right? Immediately somebody comes to mind. And again, it's totally understandable given the chaos that, see, individuals are coming to mind.
The person I thought it was a furniture salesman, though.
A furniture salesman, right? Well, see, that's what you'd become is mental furniture salesman here, right? Carrying this stuff around. And so, in terms of relationships at home, also, this has nothing to do with your work, but if you, every day, day after day, you carry home 3 or 4 chairs, you carry this stuff around with you, and you go home. Let's say if we're a couple, and I come home, and see, we have a problem here. Although she's looking at me like, you have a problem, I'm fine. You know from your own experience that intimacy, physical intimacy or emotional intimacy doesn't work. If you carry this stuff home, even though it's perfectly understandable that you've got this stuff, you take it home with you, then there are problems at home. And if you have kids, before long, there's arguments that come up with the kids. Nobody wants to come up, carry this stuff around with them all the time. You can have conflicts developing here in the building just because of this stuff. The more of that negativity you're carrying around, the more likely you are to have conflicts with someone else in the building. So there's a lot on the line just in terms of letting go.
How do you let go? You're talking all about this. You haven't told us one
Oh, no.
day when you're carrying 3 chairs. You turn on TV and look for a comedy program?
Well, so the question is, well, how do you let go? So what I'm trying to demonstrate is when you have a let go belly. See, it's not clear from the research, is it the mental, emotional experience of humor, or is it the act of laughing that's what helps you let go? My own sense that it's both, but I would put the heaviest weight on the laughter. There's especially the act of laughing just is incompatible with that emotional experience. So how do you do it? How do you get yourself to the point where you can have... That's where the skill development program comes in. And it's true that we're not focusing on that so much. So that if you look at the handout, those are the things that, in my experience, is what works. So and again, just check out the book with Bob when you get a chance. But what I have people do is first is sort of map out, well, what's your sense of humor? First of all, get a good sense of who you are when it comes to humor. It's different things for different people. It's not written down on tablets of stone somewhere, this is funny, thou shalt laugh. The trick is to find out what works for you, and that you have something that works for you. The people I am concerned about are the people who really are suffering from what I call terminal seriousness. They don't, and you can think of somebody like this, right? They never have a smile. They never laugh at jokes. They don't do jokes, which is fine. They don't find the light side of funny things. They don't watch comedies. It's just not a part of who they are. Those are the people to be concerned about. So then I have just get in touch with the playful side of yourself. I suggest that your own natural sense of humor comes out when you do that. Then I give guidelines for learning how to play with language. In fact, since you raised that question, maybe I'll do that right now. And then the focus is on finding humor in everyday situations. And the basic idea there is to be on the lookout. Put it on the front burner. Put a reminder in your office, in your car. When I used to live in North Jersey, I was doing a program as Ramada or something. There's a hotel right near LaGuardia, the airport, and there was some kind of traffic circle. And I remember I came into the traffic circle just before I was going to the hotel. I had to hit my brakes. There was a guy in the traffic circle backing up. I mean, it's a circle, right? I mean, I was so amazed at this. I went around 4 times myself. I was watching people's reactions, and it was not humor, the reactions. You know, one digit came out quite a bit, you know, as well as the horn and so forth. But to me, it was really absurd. Also, in listening to a New York station, this was 7 or 8 years ago, so this is related to, well, how do you get to the point where you can let go? It's a matter of practicing the habit of finding humor, giving yourself an opportunity to laugh, just listening to the radio. There was a couple who were mugged in the city, and there were 2 guys, and they took the woman's purse, some jewelry, the guy's wallet, and the guy had a nice leather jacket. They took his jacket. And in the guy's wallet, just by coincidence, there were 2 tickets for a New York Mets game. And so the guy knew where they were good seats. The guy knew where these seats were, so they waited till about the 3rd inning, and he told the police about that. They went down. One of the 2 guys that robbed him was in his seats. It was wearing his jacket. And so in that case, I mean, it's not designed to be humor. It's the absurdity of the situation. Things like, I was amazed when I read this. Charlie Chaplin, I don't know when this happened, in the 30s or something. He was coming into this city for something or other. He saw a sign on a marquee above a movie theater, Charlie Chaplin Lookalike Contest, tonight, 8 p.m. So just on a hunch, I mean, he had the time, so he walked in, but he didn't tell him who he was. He came in 3rd. So a little verbal aside now in terms of developing the verbal humor. Now, and we're going to, I'll stop in about 10 minutes. I know some of you have to leave immediately maybe, but we'll stop at 22. I don't watch Jay Leno anymore, but I think he's still doing this on Mondays. He used to do headlines. Right? People send him headlines from all over the country. This is another way of practicing your verbal sense of humor. Unless you only read, I think, the Times or the Wall Street Journal, most papers, have some kind of, from time to time, clever play on words in the headlines. For example, there's one in here that says, "Grandmother of 14 shoots hole in one." Got to be a golfer for that, Or trees can break wind. Or family catches fire just in time, chief says. Actually, this is an ad, not a headline. It says, "Braille dictionary for sale. Must see to appreciate." And this actually happened, usually I think they're intentional. This was not intentional. The United Way is sponsoring a child choking training program. And this actually happened. This actually happened in the Ozarks. The Animal Abuse Council is sponsoring a benefit pig roast. So another thing you can do is pay attention to signs as you're traveling around. Signs that can be interpreted in more than one way often. It's probably somewhere in the city you've all been in a restaurant at some point and you see a sign over a doorway that says, "Use stairs for restroom." There's another way, right, of interpreting that. Or, we're all shopping at the mall at some point, department stores. You've seen the signs. You go to Macy's or something. You see the sign that says, "Bras half off." Or pants half off. Or you wander down to a jewelry store. You might see a sign that says, "Ears pierced while you wait." Could it be any other way? Now, even some hospitals, are learning to lighten up. This kind of hospital is my kind of hospital. It had a sign out front so you see it when you're driving by in your car. It said, "If you're at death's door, let our doctors pull you through." Actually, I made that one up. That's it. All the others are real. Someone, when I lived in Montclair, New Jersey, someone from North Jersey said they saw a sign in, you know how churches advertise the sermon in a few words usually for the coming week? This sign, I think it was a Presbyterian church, said, Sermon at 9, Jesus walks on water. Sermon at 11, searching for Jesus. I've always wondered whether that was intentional or not. And
The one about the guy that goes through the funeral, he's a cardiologist.
No.
The cardiologist dies, has his funeral, big heart of flowers. So the proctologist walks in and starts living. What are they going to have at my funeral?
Very interesting, yeah. Yay. So that's just some aside. My last academic job was in the middle of nowhere, Texas Tech University, Lubbock, Texas. So I got to Mexico City periodically, and I saw a sign. It was actually a long time ago. Remember the big earthquake in Mexico City? It was like 20 years ago or so. It was like a year after that. I was there, and I saw a sign in the window of a restaurant. I never forgot it. It was in English. So you see it as you're walking by on the sidewalk. The sign said, all of the water served here has been personally passed by the manager. I lived in Paris for 3 years in the 1980s. And so if you're traveling in Europe, pay attention because, most things are in French and English and German. And it was obvious, I would see all kinds of things, where they didn't bother checking with a native English speaker. Actually, I see it around New York in some like Chinese restaurants too. And very humorous things, even on the menus that people aren't seeing. So in any case, so in terms of her question, well, how do you get yourself to the point where you can do that? That's admittedly the hard side. It's all a matter of developing the habits. That's just a little aside. I want to say one thing about just managing your mood. Everybody hears about positive attitude, keeping a positive frame of mind. That good feeling, remember you get? Now we know in terms of what's going on in the brain, and part of what's going on for that is what comes from humor and laughter. So if you want to keep a positive attitude, a positive frame of mind, when the situation is appropriate, humor and laughter are a powerful tool for getting to that point. And I promise to stop about now. So the other things that are on your handout that I didn't really get to, you can eyeball those. There's for team identity. I don't know if you feel like part of a team or not anymore. It's hard, given the chaos you've been going through. It's hard to really sustain that. Or maybe for those of you who are here, there is a bonding that occurs on. But wherever you stand, there's plenty of evidence that shared positive humor, and I'm emphasizing the positive side of positive humor, is a powerful bonding tool in making people feel closer together. The drawback with humor is everybody knows somebody that doesn't make good judgments about what kind of humor, when humor is appropriate. In terms of any kind of humor, and men are more likely to fall into this trap. Women do sometimes too, but men are more likely to be joke tellers. So if you do any kind of humor poking fun at the opposite sex, another racial group, another ethnic group, then we all know about that, and that actually creates barriers. Even if it's a buddy that he knows where you're coming from, but there's someone else around the corner. They hear the joke, and then it's very clear that's a problem. I haven't said anything about humor as a communication tool, but there's plenty of evidence that humor is a powerful tool for sustaining good, positive links of communication. So let me leave you by anything that I didn't talk about that you really want me to talk about. Yeah.
Getting back to the characteristics of laughter, I have a friend. When he laughs, he gets physical. He bangs on tables. He bangs on the floor.
He's really into
He
it.
pushes with his shoulders. Why is that?
I don't know your friend, but has he had a beer or two? Now, actually, some people, we do know that from birth, some people are more expressive emotionally. My guess is if he's someone you know well, even when he's not laughing, my guess he's an expressive, more outgoing, extroverted kind of person in general. It's hard to sort these things out. Some of us grow up in families where there's not much laughter at all. He probably didn't grow up in that kind of family. So the modeling, if you're surrounded by, my first wife was Italian, and I don't know how but everybody had a great laugh, in that family. And she was the same way. I didn't grow up in that kind of environment. So all these things feed in together, so it's a combination of, his starting point and being more expressive in general is my guess. So let me leave you with the reminder that, I used to watch when I was a kid, the original Art Linkletter show, Kids Say the Darndest Things, and also the original Candid Camera, which I thought was much better than the, what was that? Better than the Cosby one, but the original Candid Camera. Assume that, like Candid Camera, even in this building, life is sort of committed to setting things up for you to laugh at them. If I were to pay you $1,000 for everything in the next 24 hours you found going on in this building, it was pretty funny, you'd find some stuff going on, right? Because you'd be looking for it. Even when you leave the building, there's opportunities. And I'll stop here.